Okay, so in this video, I wanted to make it a little bit more accessible to be able to engage in the competition. So the system that's being used was built internally within TikTok, so we don't have like full access to its source code, or necessarily that there's not like a huge amount of documentation, except for the examples that were provided. So just to help people get started, to make it more accessible, I ran a script that basically just enumerated over common SQL syntax and just checked what seemed to be supported, what was a little bit finicky or to be aware of, and what was blocked. And maybe this can be helpful if you're thinking of ways to design queries that will solve the missions. So the kind of typical golden rule is if you're trying to select things that are just going to be like non-aggregates, it's going to throw an error for you, right? So you're always trying to write SQL queries that involve aggregates over groups, and typically like for track B, etc., differential privacy will then be applied. So you'll get back the statistics with a bit of noise applied. So what can you do? Well, fully supported, you've got your basic stats, count, sum, average, your advanced statistics, standard deviations, variances, your mins and maxes work, could be useful for maybe the first challenge. Your quantiles, so you can do like percentiles, column, and then what percentile you want. Interestingly, median doesn't work. So if you call median, it seems to throw an error, but if you do percentile column 0.5, which is the median, you will get a result. So that's just something to be aware of. Grouping, you can do a group by, you can do halving, and then you can do subqueries, joins, with, etc. Case when seems to fail sometimes. So you can try it, but you might have to fall back to like where conditions, just flagging that. Order by seems to work on the aggregate, same with limit, but not when it's before the aggregate. Again, just flagging it, that's something to be aware of. And then what's blocked. So interestingly, the not equals to functions don't seem to work, but you can kind of get around this. I have a note a little bit further down, but you can get around it by saying like if a value is less than, strictly less than, or strictly greater than, in your where condition, that does work. It's just actual function not equal to seems to be blocked. The keyword median also blocked, but you can just use percentile column 0.5. That seems to work. And then the main things are like cross joins, unions, windows, and casts. This is useful to know because in differential privacy, if each person is one row and then you do an operation where suddenly they can contribute up to 10 rows or 100 rows, well, if that's not taken into account by the noise mechanism, you might get a lot more signal per participant than the noise is taken into account, and that's basically increasing what's called your sensitivity. So anything that's going to explode your sensitivity, cross joins, unions, window functions would correlate your data set, which also creates complications around sensitivity. They seem to be blocked for obvious reasons, I guess. And then a few kind of like tips, I can say. So one is just instead of using not equals to, use things like where age is greater than 30 or age is less than 30, for example. That works and it's equivalent, but it gets around that problem. Of course, you can spend multiple budgets. So if you want to run the same query multiple times with different, so that, because each time you're adding Gaussian noise. So if I run the same query multiple times, then obviously that would reduce the net noise if I was to average the results. So I could do that by running the same query multiple times, but the cache will cache the query. So if you want to do that anyway, by putting in a comment, it changes the digest, I noticed. So if you use a different salts, then it won't cache it on the SDK side and will run it multiple times. You could average them to try to reduce the noise, for example, if you wanted to spend more budget on a specific query, for example. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, when you're trying to join on things, so there's two tables in the competition. There's like an income and an employment table. So if you're trying to connect the two together, always join on the user ID. That seems to be the most stable join in the rewriter. That's one thing that I've noticed as well. So the point of this isn't really helping you solve the problems, but when you're thinking to yourself, what SQL query could I write, or a set of SQL queries could I write in order to, answer one of the mission's questions? At least here's a bag of SQL functions that are stable and work, which hopefully will help you answer the questions and get on the leaderboard. So happy coding and good luck in the competition.